Aloha, everybody. Welcome back to the Wall Street Coach podcast. My name is Ann Curtin, and I'm very excited to have Dr. Michael Platt here with me today. Thank you, Dr. Platt, for coming to my podcast.
It's my pleasure.
I want to read Dr. Platt's formal bio because it's just incredibly impressive, but also because I want the traders who are listening to really understand why this conversation today is going to be so important for you, to really take a lot of notes. First of all, Dr. Platt is the director of Wharton Neuroscience Initiative, and James S. Ripey Penn integrates knowledge, university professor of marketing, neuroscience, and psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. He is the author of The Leader's Brain, which if you don't have, you have to get right away and read. I have never marked up a book as much as this book, but I have complete pages all folded over and lots of questions from there. This book is really important, traders. Please read this book. Plus over 300 articles. Dr. Platt is the former director of the Duke Institute for Brain Sciences and the Center for Cognitive Neuroscience at Duke, and founding co-director of the Duke Center for Neuroeconomic Studies. His work's been featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and many others. And he currently serves on the advisory boards of multiple companies and previously served on the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on Brain Science. He is also the co-founder of brain health and performance company Cogware, which we're going to talk a little bit about today as well. I was very fortunate to see the Andrew Huberman Lab on February 17th with Dr. Platt. The topic was called How Hormones and Status Shape Our Values and Decisions. I stopped the podcast midway and went searching to see how I could get Dr. Platt on this podcast. I was so excited. And then when he said yes, I just about, fell off my chair. So Dr. Platt, I am so happy to have you here. I feel like I've been waiting a lifetime to have you on my podcast. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course, of course. We're always eager and happy to share what knowledge we've got.
I think for traders, especially the day traders that, for the most part, watch my podcast, there are a lot of things that they wrestle with that I, certainly try to give them tools to handle. But I feel so much of the neuroscience of how they are, you don't like to use the word hardwired, but how they have a tendency to operate a certain way. Even if they just are aware of that for themselves, it could have a huge impact on how they operate in their trading. So would you be willing to just talk, at least at the start, about how strong you emphasize our needing to get clear on whether we're going to be responding fast or we're going to be responding accurate?
Yeah, so thanks for teeing this up. I think it's really the reason why the neuroscience is important is because our brains aren't some undifferentiated mush, and they're not really computers, but rather they are very finely designed Swiss Army knives that have different tools for different jobs. So you've got like a tool for perception, you've got a tool for connecting with other people, and a tool for memory, and you've got a tool for decision making. And those tools evolved a long time ago, and they're basically, we've all got the same ones in our heads. They might be a little sharper, a little bit duller, and there's really no escaping them. Is kind of the point. So the neuroscience tells us what do those tools look like, how do they work, what are their limitations, and I think that once you understand that, it's almost like the rules that our brains live by. Once you understand that, then you can do your best to navigate within those rules. And that's where I think the neuroscience can be impactful. And what you said just a moment ago in terms of the first decision you have to make is really the decision about whether you need to be fast or whether you need to be correct. And that's just fundamental because it's almost an iron law of the way our brains work, which is that there's a trade-off between speed and accuracy. So you can either kind of be really fast but really sloppy, or somewhere in the middle, you're kind of neither fast nor very accurate, or you take your time and then you're likely to make a better decision. That's a result of the way that our brains deal with, in essence, uncertainty. So, and this was really first defined by Alan Turing, the father of the computer, back in World War II when he was working with the code breakers trying to de-encrypt the encrypted messages that were sent out to the Nazi submarines to position them in the Atlantic Ocean. So they had to figure out the state of this Enigma machine. If you've seen the movie The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch, that's the story. And what he ended up defining was that actually the best thing a system could do was to take sequential samples of evidence and weigh those up to a threshold. And that's sort of the threshold of evidence you need to say, okay, this is the state of the world. It's this way, not that way. This is the state of the machine. The rotors are this way and not that way. And every study that's been conducted since then, behavioral studies, neurobiological studies, has shown that that's basically true. That's how our brains actually work. And so the way you can think about this instead is you've got, like, let's say you're coming up to a traffic light
Mhm.
and somewhere between red and yellow, and you have
Yeah.
to decide, is it red? Am I going to hit the brakes? Am I going to hit the gas and go through it? And so what you've got in your head is like a bucket for red and a bucket for yellow. So every time your eyeball catches a piece of evidence that's a little redder, it goes in the red bucket. You catch a piece of evidence a little yellow, it goes in the yellow bucket. And basically what you're doing is it's a race to see which bucket fills up first. The
Mhm.
one that fills up first is the one that's the most likely state of the world. So if the red bucket fills up first, okay, so now I hit the brakes. Okay. So that's how you can't really avoid that, you know, and that's just the process that underlies decision making. Even if you put an electrode into the brain, you can watch these buckets literally fill up with neuronal spikes that are how neurons communicate information from one neuron to another. So that has some really interesting implications because um, you can see that one of the things you can control, not so much how much evidence you're getting, that's sort of determined by the environment,
Mhm.
but rather how much evidence you decide you need.
Ah,
And so that's the size of the bucket, right? That's your threshold. So if you decide, well, I can make some mistakes, but I really need to go fast, and you can make your bucket smaller and they're going to fill up faster, but the wrong one might fill up just
mhm.
because of noise because you're getting noisy data, noisy evidence from the world. If you decide, hey, I need to really be certain, it absolutely has to be the best decision, like if you're choosing who you're going to marry, right? So you make these buckets really big, you go out on lots and lots of dates rather than just, one Tinder hookup. And then you're much more likely to make a really good decision, but it's going to take you a long time, right? And that's just kind of unavoidable.
Mhm.
Now people might say, well, I know so and so, and they seem to be able to make good decisions faster than me. And really, what that is most likely is just that they've got some expertise that they've acquired over time. You look at that real seasoned trader who's been doing it for 40 years. They're cool as a cucumber, right? And they can make a better decision more quickly. So that speed accuracy trade-off curve is not changing. It's just sliding over a little bit because their brains have learned what to pay attention to and what is irrelevant. That's
Yep.
that's essentially how that whole thing works. So you just got to decide before you go in. Do I need to be fast or do I need to be accurate?
And for those who might say, I do need to be both, how do they, in the heat of that moment, use that kind of template? Okay, both have to be, both, one of them is going to pull me. So I'm just kind of curious, literally for yourself, even. Let's say if you were in the middle of a trade or decision that had to be quick and yet had to be accurate, what would you do to prime yourself to handle that?
Well, that's a really good question. Like I said, expertise is one way that we are able to do better. The way that expertise is acquired, as I alluded to, is that you learn what to pay attention to. So if you can orient your attention much more quickly, then to the right information, then and avoid distractions, things that might be kind of like lots of other things going on.
Yeah.
That makes it more difficult to make that decision quickly and accurately. I would say that the other thing one can do is to, and I'm sure your listeners know this, is to have a plan
Yeah.
and stick to it, right? So that is good in so many ways because I mean we've seen this, time and time again. When you're going quickly, you tend to make mistakes. Um, you also tend to uh, overweight the wins, relative to the losses, which can provoke risk-seeking behavior. That's not always bad. Uh, so if you can slow that down a bit, stick to your script,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
And if at all possible, before you go in, actually even like quite literally take a few deep breaths, which help to it does two things. I mean, it sort of slows you down a little bit, but it what it does is it reduces your physiological arousal. And what you can think of physiological arousal is like a volume knob for everything that's coming into your brain, both signal and noise. If it's turning that up, and that, it's just essentially more volatile. It adds, it increases the likelihood that you'd make a mistake. So when you take a few deep breaths, quite literally saying, and this is work by my colleagues Colin Kammer and Liz Phelps showed about a decade ago that if you actively regulate like that and think to yourself, it's not what happens moment to moment that matters, but what happens in the long term. It's not chasing things as they occur, but rather saying, and we all know this, right? It's about saying, okay, what's it going to look like in 5 years, or 10 years? And
Correct.
that's really hard to have that long time horizon. But when you do that, you suppress all of the sort of the alarm bells and all of the triggers that would get you to make, very impulsive decisions in the moment.
So what I'm hearing you say is that, of course, them having a plan is something they are being told and advocated to all the time. And what happens is shiny object syndrome. They have a plan, but then something pops up that tempts them. And look, yes, this happens with the sophisticated traders too, but more often happens to the beginners, the ones who are under 5 years or under 3 years. So part of what I'm hearing is that you're saying they need to stick to that plan for more than just the discipline of it. It's because they are more tempted when they're moving quick to make too many mistakes. So it's going to help the guardrails stay on the
Yeah.
mountainside.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the other way that, and maybe you probably were going to lead into this question, but the other way in which having a plan helps is our sensitivity to what other people are doing and what other people are getting. So this is another feature of our brains. We are wired to connect with each other. That's our superpower as a species. It allows us to learn from other people. So it's like I can watch somebody else try that mushroom, and if they, die, then maybe I won't eat that mushroom. That's, an unusual strength of our species. We can cooperate. We can cooperate. We don't always cooperate. But this superpower is also a vulnerability. Okay, so and so we pay attention to what other people are doing. And if somebody else is buying that stock, buying that, GameStop or a meme coin, then we start to do the same thing and we start to think about how many other people are going to do that. And that is what creates bubbles in the market. And ultimately, if you get into that bubble, you're probably, you're going to get burned really badly. And this even happened to Isaac Newton, right? In the South Sea stock, and he got in, he invested some money, the bubble started taking off, and he saw that, and he got out, and then his friends still stuck with it, and they were getting rich, and he just couldn't help himself, and he put all his money in, and he lost everything. And he's a pretty smart guy. So,
Exactly.
I mean,
It could happen to Isaac Newton. It could happen to you.
can happen to anybody. Exactly. And so that's, I think, another area where, like, literally, Katie bar the door. Don't, if you can, don't pay attention to what other people are doing. Come in with a plan. And this is particularly precarious for people who are more dialed into other people. So, believe it or not, and so I mean, and it's interesting when I teach MBA students and undergraduates, but MBA students in particular, and a lot of them are very, very social.
Mhm.
That's sort of a characteristic of that population, and people who are more social, and we tested this in the laboratory people who are more social, who are paying more attention to other people, which is a good trait in many situations. Great for sales, great
Yeah.
for leadership, but it's actually a total, uh, uh, it's a liability for a trader, quite frankly.
You spoke to that in the book, I believe, where you said that sometimes the more successful investors are those who are less social.
Exactly. I mean, we characterized this in a large study we ran in which we used an instrument that's validated and used in neurology and psychiatry to actually it's sort of flipped. So it's used to measure social impairments in individuals who might screen positive for autism spectrum disorders or other other conditions in which social function is not is not quite right. Uh, and so in that case, those individuals who were sort of scoring low on that did the best. In fact, they were just completely impervious to being sucked into those bubbles, which
I
is
bet. I bet.
just pretty fascinating. And just to kind of follow on that, and to emphasize how deeply baked in these these routines are, is that monkeys are wired the same way. Essentially, they've got the same Swiss Army knife we do. It's a little smaller. The tools are a little duller than ours, but it's basically set up in exactly the same way. And monkeys are dialed into each other too, in the same way we are. And we ran the exact same stock market with monkeys. I mean, they were getting shapes on a computer that was like the size of their portfolio, and then how each stock cost, and they could trade them in for juice, which was like money that was like
Yep.
selling. And what we found is that monkeys were pretty impervious to getting caught in a bubble when they're playing with a computer. You put another monkey in front of them, and now they're playing together. They're both making trades, and they start to copy each other as soon as they see that the other monkey's making money, making juice, and then you see this bubble form. And it turned out to depend on exactly the same circuitry in the brain. And if you shut that off, then the monkeys don't get caught in bubbles anymore.
So this is so fascinating because, on one hand, one of my biggest concerns for a lot of the traders who trade by themselves, perhaps they belong to a Discord room. Of course, they're paying attention on X to what other traders are doing. However, they are enduring so much isolation. They are constantly by themselves. Infrequently are they able to even kind of share the difficulty of the day with their loved ones, because if those loved ones, don't fully understand trading, those highs and lows can sound completely outlandish. So I see so much isolation, not enough ability to kind of decompress at the end of the day. And yet, this caution of the compare equals despair is real too. So, what would you say is, I will say to them sometimes, you do want to find somebody in Discord room you can have some kind of, back and forth with that's authentic and not superficial. But yet, I also don't want them to be at the mercy of just doing the gaze, get pulled in by everybody else. What would you say is good way for them to approach not getting too isolated and not falling for what the herd does?
Wow, this is a really interesting problem, which, I hadn't really thought about before, but it sounds like a very lonely existence. That it's beyond despair, actually. I mean, I think that's these folks would be at risk for some serious psychological trouble, anxiety, depression, and potentially self-medicating
Yes.
to cope with those issues. And the other thing that strikes me from this is pure speculation, is that they may be deriving some sort or fulfilling some of their social drive through
100%.
through the trading,
100%.
So because
At
we have,
least they're with the community. They
yeah,
took the trade everybody else took. They don't feel it's isolated. And I caution them, if you don't have community outside of your trading, you can't help but seek that need.
yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say is like this is so important for their success at trading, I think, but also for their mental and physical health, is to step away and make time to invest in real world social relationships so that the gap between what they need in terms of social stimulation and what they're getting is small, if not zero, right? So that they don't have to get it through investing, right? Because that's not it's really not healthy. Okay, I would say that, and they should be trying to separate out the like money making from my their social needs,
Yes.
right? And get
Yes.
those social needs fulfilled outside of trading, which probably also means that they would need to be more disciplined in terms of time management. So don't chain yourself to the computer terminal, to the laptop, but set some hard rules so that and this is really hard to do. I mean, I say this to everybody in business. I mean, it's one of the most important investments you can make in your mental and even physical and emotional health. And in this case, I think will improve their performance because they'll be able to separate those two objectives, right? One of which is to get some social stimulation, if you will, and the other to make some money.
Yeah, exactly. You talked about the importance even of scheduling breaks. You talked about the importance of even short 15-minute walks. I mean, ideally, it would be great if they could have a 15-minute walk in the middle of their day with a friend, another trader perhaps. But talk about the cognitive benefits of even taking those short breaks.
Well, they're several fold. So one pertains to actually kind of innovation and exploration, sort of thinking outside the box, which could be important, I think, for trading if if you want to maybe see things differently
Mhm.
from what the herd is thinking. And what we now know is that it's not really a left brain, right brain thing. It's the circuitry is a bit different, but the metaphor's fine, which is that when you're really focused and dialed in, especially when you're staring at a screen, then that shuts off the network in your brain that opens your mind, if you will, and opens your filter to a broader range of alternatives and possibilities. Maybe those possibilities are stocks that aren't in your home country or local, because we know people have that kind of tunnel vision
Sure.
bias. So the only way to get that network started is to actually step away. So you need to turn away from the computer. That even just that act, it already starts the process. But far better if you can get up and do something that seems mindless, but go for a walk, wash the dishes, go for a run,
Totally.
all of those things, I will do that. So that would be number one. The second is that, especially when you're online, this is work that we did here at Wharton Neuroscience. Microsoft did a pilot study on this as well, which is that when we are working online, it's a tougher environment for your brain to process, right? So the information that you're getting is not the same as you would get in the real world, right? And it seems to be physically and mentally taxing and draining. And we measured, for example, brain activity in people who were going back to back to back to back meetings, and or taking a 10-minute break or 20-minute break between those meetings. And if you don't take a break, basically the signals that indicate how engaged you are, how much attention you've got, how much focus you've got, and kind of how happy you are to be there are, you know, through the floor. If you don't take a break. If you take a break, it gives your brain a chance to sort of reset and come back. And that sense of feeling re-energized seems to be true, right? So it not only, do you say that, but it's like the brain data says that in fact that is valid. So those are good things. And I think, yeah, like you said before, if you could take a break to, get coffee with a friend and have a conversation, that's calming, that satisfies your social needs. You're going to be mentally, emotionally, and physically better off for doing that. This is the hardest thing, I think, to get people to do in general in the business world, which is sort of self-care, invest in yourself. And a lot of those investments mean not working constantly, not being chained to the computer, but instead doing the things that our brains are designed for. This is not the world our brains are designed for. They're designed for a very different world where we didn't work very much, only a few hours a day to satisfy our needs. We spend most of our time socializing, a good amount of that time playing, making music, hanging out with friends and family, and also being very physically active, right?
Yep.
So if you don't do those things, you're going to fall apart. And we've seen it, especially the last, 2 decades, and in particular, I think the last 5 years.
For sure.
Uh, and boy, I think anybody who could manage to take that advice, I think will be better off.
It's funny because not only are traders looking at a screen, uh, you know, uh, most traders are looking at between 6 to 9, if not 12 or 14 screens all day long. And one of the hedge funds I worked at, I sat next to a trading desk of about 12 traders who all had about 14 screens in front of them. And I was at my desk at 6:45. They were already at their desk at 6 a.m. and they would be at their desk till 7 or 8 p.m. And here was the kicker. We had a fully stocked kitchen and we had the menu of every restaurant in New York City to deliver.
Right.
And that was all in service to keeping them at their desks.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing. I'm glad you made that point and brought up this idea. And I think people, especially, is probably, analyzed traders are probably pretty confident in themselves. I mean, they would have to be to be doing that job. But you also can't multitask. So this is another fact about the brain. You cannot do multiple things at one time. You only have one focus of attention. In fact, you only see clearly about the width of your thumb at arm's length, uh, and everything else is blurry. And so you move your eyes around to sample the visual world. Actually, you're blind when your eyes are moving. Our brains stitch that together so that we experience a whole and it feels like it's all the same, but it's not. So what you're looking at is turned up in the brain, and what you're not looking at is turned down. Okay, so you're looking at that screen over there, everything else is muted, and it's not like you can take it all in at once. And this also means that where you look predicts what you choose. So the more you look at something, the more likely you are to actually choose it.
That's
This can come back to bite you, right? Things that are, you know, uh, bigger, brighter, flashier. I mean, casinos take advantage of that, right? And a casino's not that different from
nope.
from a market, from trading, and so I think that's another thing to be really aware of. And the good news is, though, is that our attention is partially controllable, right? So where we look is a function of what the world looks like and what we're looking for. So our attention can be attracted by certain things. But we can kind of overcome that, right? So that's one thing that, for example, we encourage in terms of like a lot of loss aversion is like a real thing, right? We've all
Yep.
become very aware of it. That affects traders who kind
They
of
won't cut a loss. They
they
see
won't
it
cut a
for
loss.
long.
They won't cut a loss, right? This disposition effect. You won't cut a loss because the pain would be too much. We and others have demonstrated that that is kind of how it works in the brain. But if you can reorient your attention to the upside, right, through either, kind of brute force or like your mantra or your plan, or you can even physically change the way that information is displayed. This can help you to overcome that. So if you can look at the possible upside, you will be more open to that information. It gets turned up in your brain, and you'll be more likely to potentially avoid falling into that trap. And so that's another, I think that is a practical guideline from, what we understand about the intimate relationship between attention and decision making.
We have an X space we have to go to in just like 4 minutes, but because of what you just said, I have to close with this question. One of the dilemmas some traders face is whether or not to change the colors of the red, obviously a down day versus the green of an up day. And also they sometimes will have their P&L on their screen, which I have never advocated. I think it's a terrible idea. Please weigh in on those two pieces.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I was going to bring that up because I know of a study where if you reverse the colors, then people start making very different decisions because those biases kind of flip, if you will. And I can't remember which. I'm just being an idiot right now, but it's a little too much jet lag. But I don't remember which country it is, but where the colors are reversed. And so I mean, obviously it's what you're used to, but if you were able to do that, or at least if you were in a situation where that loss aversion would be really problematic, then you could take a tactic like that, or go monochrome. I mean,
Yep. Yep. Black
that would
one.
be so that and I think that could be really powerful. I don't know of anybody who's tested it. Maybe we should do that. But that's like, for example, that's a prescription for dialing down the addictive properties of smartphones. Because
Yes.
you put them
Right.
into monochrome, then all of those, bells and whistles that attract your attention and give you those dopamine hits for no good reason, kind of are muted.
Totally.
Right. And you
Totally.
see that people's screen time goes way down. So it's possibility is there that you could make it more, in a sense, an environment in which reason could have a better chance, of
Exactly.
actually showing up.
Exactly. Just being part and parcel of
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have probably 40 more questions, but I know we have people waiting on X. So perhaps when the schedule gets a little less insane, you would be willing to consider coming back because
Sure, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
pages and pages of questions for you, Dr. Platt. All right, so we'll go over to X-Space now, but thank you for this conversation. Again, traders, please pick up Dr. Platt's book. It is going to help you understand yourself and why you do the things that are costly in your trading. And that alone, that awareness is going to make a big difference in how you trade. So please read it. And please listen to his podcast with Dr. Huberman, which is 4 hours, almost 4 hours long. I only have it for a few minutes today, but I will be loving to make up those other 3 hours another time if you're willing. So thank you for coming on my podcast. I hope you have subscribed to the Wall Street Coach podcast. And if you haven't, it's time to do so. See you on the next podcast.